I'm Jim Zogby, and welcome to tonight's Viewpoint. Tonight, we'll take a look at a number of topics. First, the impact of social media on current events and how social networking is influencing government policy and promoting change in the Middle East. We'll do that with Sultan Al-Qasimi. He's a U.S.-based columnist and social media commentator who covered the Arab Spring uprisings on Twitter. He was called the Sultan of Tweet. He's a fascinating character. You're going to enjoy him. But first, I want to welcome back to the show His Royal Highness Prince Turki Al Faisal. He's chairman of the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies, former Director General of Saudi Arabia's intelligence agency, and served for a time here as ambassador to Washington and to the United Kingdom. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jim.
You had an op-ed in the New York Times basically saying pretty much what you said in your Washington Post op-ed a short while back. But this one created an uproar. I want to ask you, before we get into the content of it and the themes of it, why the hysteria over this resolution at the UN? It was about the Palestinian resolution and what the reaction was going to be in the United States and what the reaction would be in the world if the U.S. vetoed. Have you been able to discern in your time here why the U.S. is so hysterical about this resolution?
Really, it's a mystery to me, Jim, because after all, the United Nations Security Council and General Assembly created the State of Israel back in 1947-48. Why should there be a hysteria about Palestine being created by United Nations Security Council and General Assembly resolution is a mystery. It doesn't compute, and this is, I think, the measure of where people are at this moment. People are in a deficit about what to do about Palestine. And the fact that the Palestinian people want a state is recognized by everybody, including the United States. After all, it was President Obama last year who said at the General Assembly meeting in New York that he's looking forward to the establishment of a Palestinian state. What better way to do it than through the channel of the United Nations?
One of the things you write in the article is that if the U.S. does veto, that there will be repercussions. American influence will decline. And you say that Saudi Arabia will not be able to cooperate with the U.S. as it has in the past. That's what created some shockwaves here. Some folks are concerned about that. An idle threat, or what would exactly the nature of the lack of cooperation be?
Let me start by saying that I'm expressing my personal opinion. I'm not a representative of the Saudi government, but I do express what is generally felt and talked about in our part of the world. The U.S., since President Obama's speech in Cairo in 2009, has not done anything in the Middle East. Basically, it has ceded the leadership role in providing a strategy for establishing peace in the Middle East. And it is from that vantage point that I expressed my views, not only in this op-ed, but in the previous one in the Washington Post.
What do you think? What would the nature of a Saudi lack of cooperation be with the United States? How would one transform the relationship from where it is today?
Well, I gave examples in my op-ed on the issue of Bahrain, for example. We saw it as a need for not only Saudi Arabia, for the GCC countries also, to cooperate in helping Bahrain overcome what was admittedly a very troublesome and very awkward and very complicated situation in Bahrain. But you need to have stability in a place like Bahrain in order for civil issues to be resolved through negotiations. And people have called the Saudi and Emirati decision to send troops into Bahrain as being an invasion, as participating in quelling disturbances in Bahrain. None of that happened. These forces that went into Bahrain went to protect very strategic places in Bahrain, like the airport, the seaport, the oil refinery, and government buildings in Bahrain. They had absolutely no role to play in how the Bahraini people were engaged in their struggle for whatever rights or issues they have with their government. So it's a one situation where the public view, if you like, in the media of that situation is contrary to what was happening on the ground.
So Saudi Arabia will act on its own to defend its interests and not defer to the United States. That's one of the consequences here?
Well, I think this is par for the course for any country. The U.S. took a position that these forces should not have gone into Bahrain. But we thought that for our own interest and for stability in the area, that we must lend a hand to the government in Bahrain.
Let's talk a little about Bahrain here. Did the government in Bahrain miss an opportunity to begin the national dialogue with the opposition? Did they wait too long to move on that track, or was there no acceptance of a national dialogue from the opposition?
There was, I think, on both sides missteps taken. On the side of the government, what is important is what they're doing now. They have established the principle that they want to negotiate with the opposition. They have set up an independent commission headed by a very eminent jurist from the Islamic world and with totally independent purview to look at what happened over the disturbances that happened in February and in March. And that commission is doing its work. And the king has said in Bahrain that he will abide by whatever conclusions this commission reaches on that. So I think they should be given a chance to do that.
There were two views. One was that it was a majority Shia community that was being discriminated against. And the other view was that there was an Iranian interference in the country and a fear that Iran was exploiting this and destabilizing the country. Weigh both circumstances for me.
Well, let me start by this Iranian influence or disturbance in the area. People were saying to us after the GCC decision to send forces into Bahrain that there is no evidence of Iranian interference in Bahrain. What I tell them is you have to look back to 1979 when the Iranian Revolution took place and Khomeini came to power. Iranian intervention in not only in Bahrain but in Iraq, in Saudi Arabia and other Muslim communities began then. If you're looking for a smoking gun, you can find a smoking cannon back in 1979 and going on from there. So it was in response to that the kingdom and the GCC countries decided to lend a hand to the Bahraini government.
We have a conflict to your south as well, and that is in Yemen, which is one we've talked about on the show, and it's not a simple one. It's not two parties. It's multiple parties, and it's overlaying. It's a series of layers of problems. It's tribal. It's regional. It's within the family, within the tribe itself, the governing family, etc. Saudi Arabia has the president of Yemen in the country. He keeps talking about going back. He hasn't gone back. He's made some moves in recent days to have some kind of transition commission. What are the dangers in Yemen for Saudi Arabia, and what do you think is going to be the next step as we move forward?
Well, the dangers are not only to Saudi Arabia. I think they are to the world community. We've seen examples of that last year when Saudi Arabia tipped off the security organizations in the US and in other countries about parcel bombs that were being sent on aircraft to be exploded in the United States. And Saudi Arabia was the one that informed everybody of that. So the danger of that is worldwide. It's not just to Saudi Arabia. Yemen has had a long history of rebellion and disturbances for many years. The kingdom has worked very hard to try to help in alleviating some of the challenges that meet the people of the Yemen through economic aid, through security aid, through exchange of information, etc. And Saudi Arabia and the other GCC countries proposed a timetable and a roadmap, if you like, for achieving stability in Yemen. The president on and off, agreed and disagreed and accepted and did not accept that proposition. But in the last few days, he delegated his vice president to carry forward the GCC plan. And I hope that the other parties in Yemen will accept that.
Is it stabilizable? Is it a conflict that's gone too far out of control? I mean, one argued in the past that that President Ali Saleh controlled Sana'a at times of the day, that it really wasn't a broad national presence. But in fact, it was a more or less stable situation. Problems erupting in the north, some problems in the south. But nevertheless, what's happened today is a situation very much out of control. Can it be brought back under control?
Well, I hope so. I hope the people of Yemen can do that. Whatever solutions for the Yemen have to come from within the Yemen. There are opposition parties that have views. There is a government represented by President Saleh that also represents certain views. And the GCC proposition tried to bring together these two, in some cases, contradictory positions in a way that could help the Yemeni people get over this challenge of who represents them, what kind of government they have, etc. And the kingdom has been working very closely with the world community and with the GCC to try to help the Yemeni people achieve peace and security.
Let me shift to the north, and that's to Syria. The king had some tough words for the government. The GCC has now echoed those words. The Arab League has taken a different tack, trying to create some sort of negotiation. Is the government reformable? Can they be a party to a reform process, or do you think that they've gone the step too far?
I don't know. I'm not in a position to know the intricacies of the developments in Syria.
Did their behavior surprise you?
Very much so. I think when President Bashar al-Assad came to power, succeeding his father 10 years ago nearly, he came with a lot of goodwill on the part of people that he will do the right thing, if you like, by the Syrian people. But as we saw in the developments in Lebanon, for example, it took the president from 2000 or 1999, when he succeeded his father, until 2005 for him to withdraw Syrian forces from Lebanon. And it took the killing of a prime minister in Lebanon to do that. I hope that the president of Syria now appreciates that the continued killing of Syrian people is not going to solve his problem, that he has to solve them in meeting what these people want, which is basically a stable and a progressive and a workable solution for them.
Has he become a pariah in the region? I mean, you now have GCC countries speaking out against him, other Arab countries. The Arab League had a resolution that wasn't as you know, by any measure as tough as some would have expected or wanted, but nevertheless, he has never been as isolated. For the person who saw himself carrying the banner of Arab nationalism, he's lost many of his allies in the region.
He did, and the unfortunate thing, of course, is that the Syrian people are paying the price. That has to stop. Using Syrian forces to kill Syrian citizens is not acceptable under any circumstances.
Were you surprised by Iraq's involvement in this?
Not really. I think Iraq has fallen under the sway of Iran. And this was very clear after the removal of Saddam Hussein from power through the American intervention back in 2003. And Iraq now is doing the bidding of Iran, because Iran was a close ally of Syria and remains a close ally of Syria. But even Iran today is calling on President Bashar al-Assad to negotiate with his people. And I think he should heed that call.
Talk to me about Iraq, because the U.S. is going to be leaving. They're leaving a residual force simply to do training. Are there worries about the future of the country?
Very much so. And what I have been proposing over the last few years is that there should be a United Nations Security Council resolution that declares Iraq's territorial integrity as an imperative rather than as a choice. And that has not happened. And without that, I think there are centrifugal forces in Iraq that may lead to the disintegration of Iraq and its breaking up into various parcels. And that is not acceptable in the area. That will merely draw neighbors into the area and increase the potential for civil strife in Iraq. And the kingdom has been working very hard with all factions in Iraq to try to promote the kind of civil and national solution to these very difficult challenges for the Iraqi people.
I want to go one step further north, and that's to Turkey, which has taken an extraordinarily aggressive role in the region, very hands-on for a while in Syria. They attempted to mediate between the West and Iran. They're now in Egypt. The Arab League meeting had some pretty tough words on Palestinian issues, and people talk about the return of the Ottoman role, Turkey as a regional force. How is that being viewed in Saudi Arabia? I know that the kingdom has had warm relations with Erdogan, but how does it feel about this assertion of a broader regional role by Turkey?
Well, Turkey is a member of the community in the area, and it has a role to play. It is a very important historical as well as present actor in the area, and Turkey's declared policy is to have friends with all of its neighbors. And therefore, the relationship with Syria is not unusual in this concept of friendship with all of the neighbors. Turkey tried to mediate between Syria and Israel, if you remember, a few years back, until the Israelis made that incredible assault on Gaza in 2008, at the time when Turkey was negotiating some kind of reconciliation between Israel and Syria. And of course, the leadership in Turkey felt not only disappointed, but totally rejected by the Israeli action, because they were very close to achieving some kind of understanding between Syria and Israel. The kingdom has welcomed Turkey's participation, if you like, in promoting dialogue and peaceful cooperation between the Arabs and Israel. And we will continue to support that Turkish position. We see no threat from Turkey's participation in the area, but on the contrary, we think it can be very helpful.
If you want to get in the conversation, give us a call. If you're calling from overseas, the number is 001-202-420-5665. From here in the U.S., it's 1-202-420-5730. Now let's get back to Saudi Arabia, close to home. Arab Spring started in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, and other places in the Gulf, and now Syria as well. How has it affected Saudi Arabia? How has the impact of this regional uprising impacted folks in the country?
Inevitably, it has had an impact. We've had very close relationship with Egypt and with the other countries historically, and any disturbance or insecurity or civil unrest in these countries affects Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is probably one of the largest investors, not only in terms of government but also in terms of people, in a country like Egypt. There are literally family ties between hundreds of thousands of Saudis and Egyptians across the Red Sea. In Tunis as well. Today I saw in the news that our foreign minister paid a visit to Tunis to try to look at how Saudi Arabia can be helpful to a country that faces dire straits, whether economic or otherwise. In Egypt, the kingdom presented a program of support of $4 billion in aid, in loans and grants to revitalize, if you like, the Egyptian economy. We have nearly, or if not more than 1 million Egyptians working in the kingdom. Naturally, whatever happens in Egypt affects us. So the kingdom has been very much affected by these events in Tunis and Egypt and in other places.
Now, Saudi Arabia has a youth bulge, as does Egypt and Tunisia, and educating more than 100,000 young people a year who are graduating, entering the job market. The king came back from his convalescence and announced a package, one could call it a stimulus package, to sort of create job opportunities. But here's the problem that people look at. They look at certainly an expanded revenue base with oil prices being up, and it's been something the kingdom's been blessed with. But can the government itself absorb all of these young people in public sector, or doesn't there need to be a private sector job creation effort as well? And the private sector is lagged behind. And so the question is, does this youth bulge down the road produce the kind of dissatisfaction in the country with shortages of jobs and shortages of housing and shortages of opportunity that create the kind of problems that we saw in other Arab countries?
Well, it's not an issue of either or. It's not either the government or private enterprise. And that's why the king's package, as you said, includes both. A stimulus to the government in order to employ people and provide them with job opportunities, but also a stimulus to the private sector to create more jobs by providing finance for housing for Saudi families if they want to build houses, by providing educational possibilities. You know, the kingdom is one of the largest participants in scholarship programs for students outside the kingdom, and particularly in the United States.
See, because as we poll in all the Arab countries, in Saudi Arabia, we get a fairly high satisfaction level.
Alhamdulillah.
And a very high optimism level. In Egypt, we saw warning signs. In Lebanon, you see warning signs. We don't poll in Egypt, in Syria, never did it there. But in Saudi Arabia, the numbers are very good. The question is it sustainable over the long term? And do you think that in the long term, the private sector can create these jobs to relieve the burden from government? Because can you absorb a couple of million people over the next 10 years in public sector jobs? The answer is probably no.
Well, the king's position is that Saudi Arabia's natural resources are depletable, whether they're oil or other mineral resources. They'll be finished in a few years' time. The undepletable resource in the kingdom is its human resources. And that's why his main focus and interest has been to provide the human resources in the kingdom with the skills and know-how that can help them provide a sustainable standard of living for themselves. And therefore, the kingdom's, for example, budget allocates more than 25% of its total allocation to education. And we saw the king's creation of the King Abdullah University for Science and Technology, which is unique in the world in the sense that it is totally devoted to developing skills and know-how for the people and research into issues like energy, water resources, and commensurate development projects in the kingdom. And this is a university that is totally, for example, co-educational for men and women. And more than 60% of its student population is from outside the kingdom. And probably more than 60% of its professorial staff is also from outside the kingdom. So this is how the intention is of the king, is to provide the skills and know-how to the Saudi people so that they can fend for themselves, if you like, in a very challenging world.
Let me go to Angola for our first call. Caller? Hello? Hello?
Yes, how are you?
Very good. Your question?
Yes. Yes, I have two questions, if that's possible. I just want to ask the ambassador, how can the Saudi call for, on the Arab words, to have some democracy when we don't see any election going on in Saudi? And everything in Saudi Arabia revolves around the king. I mean, we don't see any ministers, any prime ministers, any parliament.
Okay, thank you. It's a call from Angola. Thank you.
Can you repeat?
He said, how can you call for democracy when there's no democracy in Saudi Arabia and there's no elections and everything revolves around the king?
What I have called for is a stop to the killing of people. and to negotiate. This is what the kingdom does with its own people. As you know, and you've been there, Jim, many times, the king has a weekly audience, public audience, for any Saudi to come and meet with him and present whatever complaint or idea or issue that they have with whatever government department or social problem that they face. We believe that we are still a country in development. We have no belief that we have solved all of our problems. We're still beginning on the road for development. Participatory government is an issue that the kingdom is very much seeking in its proposition for development throughout the coming years. And hence this month there will be the municipal elections again in choosing representatives to municipal councils. And this is a problem that will continue with us. It is not something that we believe that we have found the solution for, but we are learning from the experience of others. We look upon the United States as a country that we can learn much from, whether from the good or from the bad. We look at other countries for examples to pursue. I think the important thing to remember about Saudi Arabia is that it recognizes that it has certain deficiencies, and it recognizes that the need to overcome these deficiencies should come through evolution rather than revolution.
Let's go to Netherlands for a call. Caller? Hello?
Yes, hello.
Yes, hi. Your question?
My question, what is the interest of Arabia Saudi changing the regime in Syria?
Okay.
And knowing that, shall I repeat?
No, I heard you.
Okay. And in case they change the regime this way, leading to civil war, how Mr. Turkey sees the future of the region and the peace with Israel?
Well, in Syria, I think it's up to the Syrian people to choose whatever regime they wish. That is something for them to decide. Saudi Arabia can never tell the Syrian people what kind of regime that they have. As far as peace is concerned, it was Saudi Arabia that proposed the Arab Peace Initiative back in 2002 and got 22 Arab countries to commit to that peaceful initiative towards Israel. Throughout the world, we've had very positive response to that Arab Peace Initiative. The only country that has had a negative reaction to that peace initiative has been Israel. So the table is on the ball is on the Israeli side rather than on the Arab side for the peace in the Middle East.
And so Saudi Arabia doesn't have an interest in changing the regime in Syria?
It is up to the Syrians to decide that. There is no way that the kingdom can tell the Syrians what kind of regime they have.
Let's go to UK for a call. Caller?
Yes.
Yes, your question.
Is my question?
Yes. Give me your question,
Yes.
please.
I guess I want to say hello to Prince Turki Al Faisal.
Mm-hmm.
I am originally from Iraq, and I live exactly in London near 15 years. And Mr. Turki Al Faisal, when he's been director of security service in
Right.
Saudi Arabia 19 and until 2000, if I am
Right.
not wrong. And he
Give me your
Arabia,
question.
he support
Give me your
the
question.
support.
Yes.
Yes, I give you the question. Give me time, please. Because they support American coalition and British forces to remove Saddam Hussein. Now, the question, this is the main question. As the Turki Al Faisal, and he is happy now what happened in Iraq, the innocent people is killed,
Okay.
is a critical situation in Iraq. Who is the better? Saddam Hussein. At the same time, I am against Saddam Hussein regime.
Okay,
I
thank you.
cannot pretend.
I get the question. Thank you. It's an important question. There was support for removing the regime. The regime is gone. Is Iraq better than it was? And was there not another way?
The kingdom publicly opposed the military invasion of Iraq. And I remember when I was in the intelligence service at the time, during the time of Saddam Hussein's rule of Iraq, that we used to call for change within Iraq to come from within Iraq rather than from without. And definitely the situation after the American invasion of Iraq has cost a lot of Iraqi lives and other lives as well. So the mere numbers of people killed over the last 8 or so years since the invasion of Iraq has been far too much to bear for any country. The Iraqi people deserve a better situation than the one that they got during those 8 years.
What's the way forward at this point? America's going to be pulling troops out.
Yes.
Iran does have a footprint.
It does.
Saudi Arabia has a footprint. Turkey has a bit of a footprint as well. But what happens in Iraq? What happens to Iraq? Is there a way forward to stabilize the situation post-American withdrawal?
Iraq requires, as I said, a United Nations Security Council guaranteeing the territorial integrity of Iraq. Whatever centrifugal forces in Iraq are operating today to separate Iraq into Kurdish, Sunni, Shia enclaves, if you like, is not helpful. And therefore, the world community has to take upon itself the responsibility of protecting Iraq's territorial integrity. And I think this is what is needed. And so far, I haven't seen anybody taking action on that.
Let me go to California for a last call in this segment. Oh, we have one other one holding. I think we'll get them both in. California first, your question. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, your question.
Yes, my question is, I want to ask His Highness why he said once that he'll be, so the Arab countries going to be very angry from the United States if they use the veto against the Palestinian state that they're going to go to the United Nations for it.
Okay, we'll take that in a second. And we have another caller. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, where are you calling from?
Yes, I'm calling from Jaham.
Okay, thank you. Your question?
I do have a question to His Excellency the Ambassador, yes, about the role of the two holy sanctuaries of Islam in the Muslim world. I've seen some Muslim, actually, people from outside of Saudi Arabia, they are not happy about the role of the two holy sanctuaries, does not engage in the affair of the Muslim world outside, for example, the phenomenon of Somalia. We have not actually seen any support from religious leaders of the prayer in the Holy Shrine of Mecca.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to stop you there and let Prince Turki take that one, and also the first question. The first question again about the UN, why will Saudi Arabia get so angry? And then secondly, disappointment that as the center of Islam, the place of the two holy sanctuaries, no action, no prayers, no sense of concern about Somalia.
Well, I don't know where this caller has been in the last few years on Somalia, because the kingdom has had a very active and very forward-looking position on Somalia for the last 15 years since Somalia broke up. The leaders of the prayers in both mosques have expressed the need for the Somali people to overcome their challenge. And just a couple of weeks back, during the holy month of Ramadan, King Abdullah initiated a public call for contribution to meeting what is presently now a very dire situation for Somali refugees, not only in Somalia but in other places in Africa, to provide them with medical and humanitarian support. And both imams of the mosque in Mecca and and Medina supported that call and issued statements of that nature. On Saudi Arabia's disappointment, if you like, with what is happening in Palestine, and the fact that America, as I said in the previous words that I mentioned, America ceding its role of leadership in bringing a peaceful resolution to the Arab-Israeli dispute and the Palestinian situation is understandable. We've supported all of the plethora of programs and initiatives and other activities to overcome the problem between Israel and Palestine. As I said, the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative was initiated by Saudi Arabia. Palestine's striving to seek statehood in the United Nations is fully supported from Saudi Arabia. Naturally, if the US vetoes that proposition, there will be huge disappointment, not just in Saudi Arabia, but throughout the Muslim world.
Thank you for joining us, Prince Turki.
Thank you, Jim. And let me say something. Your program is watched by many people. And I hope that you will continue to provide the kind of insight and the kind of informative discussion that you've had, not just with me, but with others as well in the future.
Thank you so much. I hope to see you back in October.
Inshallah.
When we come back, we're going to take a look at the impact of social media with the man who tweeted a revolution, Sultan Al-Qasimi, and we'll take more of your calls, so stay tuned. Thanks.